Hello, everybody. I'm Paul Ryden. Our guest today has never lacked for anything to do in his 87 years. At least that's how it appears. And he hasn't limited himself to one subject or field of expertise. He's been a lab technician, a forest superintendent, and since retiring, he's established a campground and hunting retreat, developed a handyman service, has written some 300 essays, 11 books, two novellas, and a book on retirement. He's written poetry and even wrote a book about how he shot 80 on the golf course at the age of 82. I would love to get hold of that one, but Dale's not sending me a free copy, so I'll just have to get it myself. But all that wasn't enough. Now, Dale Netherton, our guest, has now tackled the origin of life itself in a book called The Random Universe. Dale, welcome. You have made good use of your 87 years. That is for sure.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a well, as Gus says, it's been a real good party.
Good enough. What got you interested in such a wide variety of topics, or do you just have a short attention span like I do?
Well, I tell you, I think it's always it's even when I was a small child, and it was always intrigued me to be like walking down a creek and seeing what was around the corner.
Hmm.
It's uh, that's always intrigued me in life to say,
Hmm.
well, what's next? What's
Yeah.
what's coming up next? And of course, I do that from a intellectual viewpoint to say, well, uh, what ideas are there that I haven't looked at, or what can I examine, and what can I critique, and what can I expound on, whatever. But
Yeah.
that was the approach.
What kind of poetry did you write?
Well, I was elected class poet when I was in high school.
I didn't know there was such a thing.
Well, evidently I wrote enough that they thought there ought to be.
You know,
So anyway, yeah, I've written. Uh, well, I'm the poetry representative in Iowa for Iowa poetry for the county,
oh,
for
okay.
Van Buren County where I live, and I've put in. I send in every year, which has been for the last at least, well, it's been for 30 years or so. I send in five poems,
Hmm.
and I've been printed in every year. Every one of them, I've been managed. I've been published in them. So, but what kind of poetry do I write?
Yeah.
I write free verse. I write rhyming poetry. I've even tried some things like uh, what's a wow
Oh, haiku?
haiku. That's it.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, that's a fun one. That's fun.
yeah.
Well, what inspired you to tackle the subject of the origins of the universe?
Well, when you're looking for things, it's sort of like climbing a mountain too. You keep looking for higher things, or things that are more challenging than the ones that you've already experienced. Is And that's one of the things that's kind of driven me, is that I really like new things, new approaches, new ideas.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't like to just get into a rut.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so anyway, when I got to thinking about this, I was looking at all the ways that people are trying to explain this, and I'm saying, it's down to two fundamentals.
Hmm.
They come down to, they say, well, the traditional, popular, colloquial, whatever, is there has to be something designed. It has to be designed, and it has to start out.
Hmm.
It has to begin. It can't. And those things are just dogmatically stated. And I said, well, wait a minute. I said, there's some problems there. And that's what kind of drove me to look at this in a different way, to say, well, no, wait a minute. Uh, First of all, you're going to end up with a circular argument if you say, well, either a Big Bang or a designer. Uh, you have to, if you say that has to be, then you have to go back and say, well, what caused that?
Hmm.
So when you get to looking at that, you say, well, wait a minute. that's circular. It's not logical. It's not. It won't work.
Well, what conclusion did you draw then?
Then I said, well, it said, you ask yourself and say, well, wait a minute. If there's no if there's no why would there not? Why would there have to be a beginning? That's human beings look at things and say, well, their life is a beginning and their life ends,
Hmm.
but they transmit that idea to the universe, and that's not a human being. That's something that's there. And then you have to look at it and say, well, now, can you imagine what it would be without anything? Well, no, I can't. I can't imagine there being. I mean, you'd have to imagine. Well, what could there? Where could there not be any? Not no space, no nothing. Where would that ever be? And you'd say, well, that doesn't make any sense at all. It's got to have been that it's always been here.
Well, that's a
I mean,
lot to wrap your head around.
it is because and I think the hardest part of that is the fact that there's been all these false theories thrown out, and people have gobbled onto them, saying, well, that people of science and people of religious prominence and all this have said this, so it must have some veracity. But the fact of the matter is there's a big gap there. It's they haven't looked hard at the premise that they're operating off of, and that is that they're saying, well, it has to start somewhere.
Mhm.
Well, the universe doesn't have to start. Where it's sort of with the thing with we get into this randomness is to say, well, to the universe is if it's uh, if it's limited, which many people have claimed, it's limited, it's expanding. So it's now my question is expanding into what? You
Mhm.
know, are you gonna have a barrier there, and then there's nothing on the other side?
Mhm.
Is there going to be space there?
Mhm.
It just boggles the mind the kind of things that are overlooked.
Well,
And these are supposed to be scientists looking at this and saying, well, they glob onto something like, for instance, it's the universe is expanding. Say, well, what do you mean? And then where's it going to go? I mean, how are you how are you going to expand something that's everywhere?
right.
You
Well,
know,
there are many people who would say that it takes a certain amount of faith to believe that the universe, as orderly as it is the result of some random development, though.
well, I realize that, and that's where that's what they have to rely on is faith. And of course, my answer to that is that faith is defined as belief without evidence.
Mhm.
Well, the evidence is there if you look at it to say you can't come up with something beyond what there is.
Mhm.
You can't come up and say, well, there's nothing beyond that. So how do you have faith that there's you know how do you have faith in that
Well,
that somehow that it's going to stop at some point,
mhm.
or that there's going to be somebody or something that well, eventually you're going to have to get back to the Aristotelian uh, concept of the unmoved mover.
Mhm.
Well, why is that so valid, but the universe and everything in it isn't?
But it's so orderly. That's what I think people would say.
Ah,
It's
yes, the orderly part. That's a good. That's why I said that's why I listed it as random. If, say, for instance, you've got all the time in the world, or even out in the universe, and you've got all the distances, and you've got all the elements. What do you think is the chance that there'll be something that comes together like, see, the orderliness, there actually is collisions, there's explosions, it's not all orderly. It's in fact, but it's happening in different ways. And if you were to flip a coin, you know, billions and billions of times, to use Carl Sagan's vernacular, is eventually you could flip it where it would land on its edge, and it would not either be heads or tails. You could do that if you had enough time and you had enough uh, in terms of the universe, the space and all the options that are there. You're going to end up with some very phenomenal things, like, for instance, the Earth. It's not a matter of it being designed or being orderly, because we have floods, we have tornadoes, we have things that are totally. They look at the design thing is that it's friendly to humans. Well, it's not. It's not friendly to humans at all. In fact, if the sun would burn out, there'd be no humans.
Mm.
But the fact of the matter is, all these things have the chance. I mean, there may be, if you take a look at the vastness of the universe, which I don't think people look just how vast it is, because you're not going to reach the end of it. That's pretty vast.
Hmm.
You know, that's another thing that kind of strikes me funny is people talk about their fear of eternity being in hell and all this sort of thing. But when you talk about there being an eternity of time, oh God, they always talk about, well, when time ends, well, time ain't going to end. It goes on just like the universe. It goes on and on and on. It
Well,
didn't
how
begin.
how do you know that?
Well, I experience it. I mean, for instance, uh, what could stop it? What
Well,
what what can you imagine could stop time?
well, I suppose some people would say, and I would say God.
Well, then we'll get into this discussion. God, where did God come from? God, there's how many different gods have been created by man? There's
Well,
been
now that
fire
that's a
gods.
whole different discussion right there.
Yes,
Um,
but that's central to that issue, to say that there's all these different gods. Then all of a sudden they said, "Well, wait a minute. We've got to have a God that is bigger and better than anything." So they gave him these attributes of all-knowing and all-powerful. Well, if
mhm.
you take a look at those two attributes, you know that came from mankind because they're contradictory. And only man can come up with an idea that's contradictory and then never question it,
Mm.
because you can't be all powerful and know what's going to happen, and you can't know what's going to happen if you can't change it. So that tells you that's where that idea came from, because that's what it was. But I always listen as, it's an imaginary deity. That's what all deities are. There aren't any of those. uh, there's no rain god, there's no fire god, and there is no God.
Well,
There's just
see, I think there
that's
are.
that's what people have accepted, because it's easy to explain something that you don't understand if you posit something that does understand it.
So you think that empirical evidence is the only way to prove anything, that since you can't prove the supernatural by scientific means, that there must be no other way to prove it?
Well, you can't prove what isn't there. You
But
you you
maybe there's a
only
different way
you
to
can
prove it.
only prove you can only prove by offering evidence, and evidence requires reality.
Hmm.
Because you can see, you go into a courtroom, nobody says to you, says, well, you just have to believe this. And the judge would say, well, no, we're not going to play that game. He said,
Well,
you offer me evidence.
you write that your book is for someone open-minded enough to consider conclusions other than dogma, and there are Christians who obviously have doubts. They wonder about those same questions. Do you ever have doubts, or do you ever think you might be wrong?
No, not anymore. You
Then
know,
what's the difference between you saying
well,
you've never been
because
wrong
they
and
don't examine their premise. The
well,
premise they have is that God is real. Now, if they
mhm.
look at that, and then the offshoot of that is rationalization of why they think that that's real. They'll use things like, well, this, the stars are there, and there's all these beautiful things going on, and it's orderly. But the fact of the matter is, those things are not the result of something making them there. They are what is there.
But how do you know that?
Well, because I see it. I know it. I see it. I I don't have to prove what I know, where this idea came from,
Mhm.
because that's that's historically evident. Is men wrote the Bible. They claimed that they were inspired, but you don't have to believe them. You don't have to say, well, just because they said it, that they said they talked to God. He said, well, there's a lot of people that talk to God that are delusional, and these people were too, because people came to them and they said, look, tell us why the sun comes up in the morning. Well, they didn't know. They didn't even know that the world was round. But they said, well, they're going to ask us some questions. So we're the poopahs of the area. So we'll give them an answer. Well, for instance, why does it rain? Well, the rain god, we've got to keep the rain god happy, so it will continue to rain, so we'll have crops, and all that same idea just got carried over into everything instead of just isolated instances of fire and water and whatever harvest. It came out as uh, well, why not everything? Why not have, if you're going to have a God of something, why not have a God that's over everything, even all the other gods? And of course, then they were faced with the fact, well, what about these other gods? Well, then they had to write down, well, you can't have any God before this one. And that's the way human mind works. You can see how that all flows into what happened.
Mhm.
And that's I don't have to take something. I mean, what would you offer to as proof for something that somebody has thought up? Say, for instance, Santa Claus. They said, well, I talked to Santa Claus, and I know he's real. You say, okay, fine, introduce me. In this day and age, take a photograph, send me a video, give me some information that proves that what you're saying is true.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, but see, I don't know of anybody who's died for their belief of Santa Claus. And I would probably feel the same way you do if it weren't for Jesus, because
Uh,
yeah, I know. We're totally different. That's fine. I'm
no, no,
my role is
no,
not
no,
to my role is
no.
not to debate.
That's exactly the kind of questions that I address
Right,
on this stuff.
I'm sure you do. I mean, these are not new questions to you, but my only response to that is that people died not for what they believed or what they had faith in. They died for what they saw. And that's all I'm saying about that. Otherwise, I think I would probably agree with you about the other stuff. But
Well,
again,
the fact is that there's been a lot of people that died.
sure,
In fact, all people die,
it's
but
true.
there's nobody ever come back. That's
Well,
that's
now
that was
that's where I would disagree.
well, you may disagree, but the fact of the matter is show me a person that has died, and you can't offer me an empty grave, because that could have happened by anybody, bandits or wolves or whatever, hauling
Right.
off a body.
Right.
But
But yeah, but there
and
were
and then
historical.
there were claims that they had met him and all this,
Mhm,
and then there's also claims that he's going to come back again.
mhm.
But the fact of the matter is that is all, well, I'd call it delusional for these people that wrote this, because they, you know, it doesn't happen. We don't see any
Well,
of
that's what I'm saying is that if they saw that and they claim that, and then somebody threatened their lives, they'd say, "Okay, we're only kidding. Okay, it's not true." Well, they died for it, so that's all I'm saying.
Well, yes, but they that was they just because they died. doesn't mean that they weren't delusional.
No, they were killed, not just died.
Well, that's true because that was a way of life, so to speak, in those times, is they killed uh, uh, well they killed Jesus, so to if that's a true
Mhm.
story. Yeah, but and they always were that was crucifixion was a real thing for many people.
Yes.
But they all died not because they were actually guilty. If they it's sort of like the witch trials. They burned women because they said they were witches.
Right.
Well, these people that, like for instance, Christians were at that time were not the dominant uh, religious group.
Right.
Well, then they were minorities, and what they were preaching was different than what was. You see that today in the Muslim world, is
Mhm.
to say, if you're not with us, then you must be
Yeah.
eliminated.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So
Well,
so that's yeah, that's a whole new.
oh,
Uh,
sure. Yeah. And maybe you'll
yeah.
write another book about that because
Well,
you wrote so many books. Why not that?
well, I think this book, the book that I write that I've written. I'll show you.
Okay.
It's here. I've got it right here in this pile. Oh, the unasked questions.
Uh-huh.
That covers most of that.
All right.
I
Well,
think that's a book that I put on a level with the random universe as far as uh, a deeper uh, search.
all right. Well, the book is called The Random Universe. It's available on Amazon, and I assume it's available other places.
Yes, it's my uh, website is you can actually go there and see all the different books. There's 15 of them, and there's some videos. It's www interpretativevisions.com, and and it also has reviews, and it has some excerpts and things. So I'd encourage anybody that's interested to take a look at that and see what's available there.
All right. Well, Dale, thanks again so much for joining us from Southeast Iowa. You have a great day, and thanks again for joining us.
Okay, well, thank you.
You bet. And thank you, folks, for spending a few minutes with us on the Global Book Network. I'm Paul Ryden. We'll see you next time.